Welcome back to another episode of Garry's Garage. Last time round we pulled the engine and gearbox out of the car. Today it's time to split them. I've already removed all the bolts holding the engine and gearbox together, ran out of storage space on the camera. Now it's time to get this gearbox off. Now we've got the gearbox off, it's time to take the clutch off. Two reasons for needing to take this off now, even though it's only just gone on. Firstly is the flywheel. The one I'm using at the moment is my original one from a Mitsubishi FTO with the original clutch. Just couldn't take the power, so it glazed over. I had it reground, but the place I took it to didn't do a very good job. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a replacement, so I had to put it back on the car because it was a poor reskimming job. The clutch was then very grabby. Added to that as well, there's a spigot bearing in the middle, which should be in the end of the crank, which doesn't stay in the end of the crank. So I think the combination of those two has meant that the input shaft has been bouncing around, not properly centered, so when pulling away from a standstill there's a horrible juddering. It's just terrible to drive. So the aim is pull this apart, put another flywheel on and try to make sure that this spigot bearing is properly centered in the crank so the input shaft of the gearbox doesn't flap around. Oh, oops. Okay, we're down. It's on the floor. Whew. Okay, well that was really dumb. Really dumb. Doesn't look like there's any damage. Lost a bit more coolant, but doesn't really matter. Just mop it up. Let's get back to what we were doing. Okay, so we're back. Following that stupid mistake. The engine is now on the floor. Crane supporting it as well. So, let's whip this flywheel off and have a look at it. That'll be off then. Now we've got the flywheel off, got a little bit closer look at the crank and show you what the problem is. Because of this adapter plate, it spaces the gearbox just a little bit further away from the engine. So, I've got a spacer for the flywheel, and because this is originally a front-wheel drive, well, four-wheel drive engine, the input shaft of the gearbox doesn't usually get supported in there. Plus, this engine came from an automatic, so no input shaft, just a big torque converter. So I have a spacer which goes in the end of the crank. It's actually at the moment being quite a tight fit, and a phosphor bronze bush which is for the 200SX gearbox. Now the problem is this combination is no longer an interference fit, so it's fallen out, and it was basically doing that behind the flywheel. So input shaft, rather than being held nice and central and can't move, was doing that. So that's the problem we need to fix. Last time took the engine gearbox out, separated them, pulled the clutch and flywheel out, and I've got something underway for fixing the clutch. While I'm waiting for that, I thought I'd move on and have a look at the front wheel. Well, more specifically, front wheel speed sensor. Using my Link ECU Extreme, I've got front wheel speed and rear wheel speed both being pushed into it. Rear wheel speed is coming from the diff, so that's picking up on the 4 bolts between the prop shaft and the diff. Diff ratio is about 3.9 to 1, so for every 1 revolution of the rear wheel we get 4 revolutions of the prop. So that gives about 16 pulses on the rear speed sensor for every revolution of the road wheel. On the front, I'm picking up on the back of the 4 bolts that hold the hub and disc assembly together, so that means I'm getting 4 pulses per wheel revolution. This makes the slip percentage between front and rear for things like launch control and traction control a little bit difficult, because every time the rear updates, the front doesn't necessarily. So the slip percentage grows with every revolution of the rear, and then the front gets a pulse, and then the slip percentage gets reset and recalculated based on the new speed from the front. So what I need to do is add a few more pulses to the front. So I've got an idea for that. Let's see if it's going to work.
Time after time, you're always right. Wow. You never chase, yet hold me tight. Wow. Give me out, don't you mind it? Have we lost you and I cannot find it? Time after time, I think you lie. Let's get closer tonight.
So this is the speed sensor I've added. That picks up on these 4 bolts here. My plan is to add another couple of bolt heads in between those so that it's got 16 pickups rather than just 4. Okay, let's separate the disc from the hub.
Time after time, you're always right. Wow. You never chase, yet hold me tight. Wow.
I'm just going to very roughly mark out what is around about the centre line. That looks pretty good to me. Now I need to find the points a third of the way between each of those, and that's about where my bolt head's going to go. So from centre to centre is approximately 65 millimetres. Let's try 25 millimetres. It's going to be too much. Yes, 24 millimetres is the one we want. 24 millimetres looks pretty good to me. So now we want to drill those out. I've drilled my pilot holes and I found 8 small bolts. So I will drill out and tap my pilot holes to take those. So let's get that done now. Okay, so that's all my holes drilled out to 5 millimetres. Now, time to tap them. Now the holes have been tapped, going to insert the bolts with a washer, flat washer and a spring washer. that's all the extra bolts in the brake disc. Yes, I know that if I replace the brakes in the future I'll have to redo this job, but the car doesn't get used very much. It's quite a light car, reasonably easy on the brakes, so it should be a good few years before I need to be replacing the brake discs. So let's go stick this back on the car.